Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to What's in My Head podcast. I'm joined by Mr. Bob Sager. Legend does not really state or it does not pontificate the true meaning of this man sitting right here. Bob, how are you, sir?
I'm good. Thank you. Feeling good at my age, which is, I'll be 94 in about a week.
I know I saw that you got a birthday coming up on January 26th, man. What is that like? We'll get into your career in just a second, but we can only hope to be 94, 95, 96. Some of us will hit triple digits, man. But what does it feel like for you? I mean, is it weird? Is it interesting? Or how do you feel on a day-to-day basis, Bob?
I'm feeling health-wise, I'm feeling very good and happy. I'm still active with doing things. There's a mouse con coming up in the end of this month in Bakersfield, California. So I'll be over there spending the day and meeting people. That'll be fun.
Yeah, I can only imagine. So what do you do for fun now? At almost 94 years old, what's Bob doing to keep himself active?
I get my fun from the computer and from meeting people like you. And I get some fan mail from people too. And some people requesting autographs or drawings. And I enjoy the contact with fans. It's great.
Are you still doing commissions and everything?
Not really. I'll draw ahead of some of the character, but I don't want to do any large pictures anymore.
Gotcha.
I donated all my books to Merced College. I think I gave 105 books.
Wow.
Art books.
Yeah.
Because I don't have room where I am now to store them. So I donated them to the studio, the university.
That's mighty nice, man. Like I said, if I know some artists are doing commissions and some aren't. So if we can ever get you some work and we can send some fans your ways, and you want to make a little bit of extra money, we'll make sure we cross that bridge when it comes, Bob. But
Okay,
kind of buried the lead a little bit, man. Like I said, in my opinion, the term legend gets thrown around, but that term specifically, it fits for you. I mean, if we could just go off of some of the shows from the original Scooby Doo in 1969. Then you had the Flintstones. Then you had the Smurfs. You had the Jetsons. And I won't be able to mention everything you've worked on because, like I said, when did you get into this animation industry? We'll start there, and then we'll just see where it takes us.
It was 1956 when a friend of mine, who was an art school friend, was working at Seamus Culhane Studios in Hollywood. And he called me up and he said, "Bob, get over here with your portfolio." So I did rush over with my art school portfolio. And the art director, Bill Hertz, was looking through it. And he was sort of bored, I think, with my work, live drawings and illustration and nothing with cartoons, except in the end, before I finished loading it up, I put in 3 or 4 drawings of cartoon characters doing things like animals acting like people and a lion tamer, and they're all cartoon drawings. And Bill Hertz said, "This guy has talent." So he hired me to do background painting. Isn't that amazing that in those days, there was no art schools around where you taught animation. You had to learn on the job. So he felt that he could teach me, and he did. I was assisting a friend of mine. He showed me the ropes. And I learned how to do background painting.
So what was it like breaking into the industry? You're coming from, you said realistic, you weren't doing too many cartoony stuff as far as your portfolio goes. And then this guy, he sees something in you and you're doing backgrounds. What is that first couple months or first couple years like transitioning?
Well, I was a cartoonist like most kids until I went to art school, and they stopped. They said, no cartooning. We're just going to teach illustration and figure drawing. And so for several years, I forgot all about cartooning. But when I was so into animation, all of a sudden I was in the field and not knowing anything about it. And luckily, whatever person would say to me, "Well, we need a storyboard. Can you do one?" And I said, "Sure," but I'd never done one before. So my friend gave me the correct paper, and talked to me about long shot, close up, and medium shot, and all that stuff. and where to put the dialogue. So I did the job, and it was successful. But that's the story of my career. Whenever somebody said, "Can you do this?" I said, "Sure." Then I'd find out how to do it.
You always say yes, you never say no.
Right. You always say yes and work it out. So that's how I learned, by doing.
That's
Being
fantastic.
told to do something, and then I found out how to do it, and I did it.
That's fantastic. And like I said, there's no real structure to these podcasts. So we will jump over or jump to and from, different eras, just so we can kind of touch on a little bit of everything. And like I said, if you want to come back on down the road, we no problem getting in, and we go a little bit depth into specific details. But when we were talking offline a couple of days ago, there was one topic I told you that I would love to hit on, and UPA was one of those. I've never had anybody that worked with or for UPA, and it's one of my favorite studios of all time. I mean, from the color palettes that they would choose, their distinct style. I mean, them and Jay Ward, when I think of cartoons and animation specifically, those two stick out because they weren't the traditional, they're not, I don't want to say traditional. They weren't the MGM, the Warner Brothers. They weren't the Hanna-Barbera. They had their own style. They had their own color. They had their own flow. And I would just love to know anything and everything that you could possibly, remember about UPA and working there. So what was working at UPA like?
When I was at Warner Brothers, I went to UPA when they had an open house because they were trotting out Jared with Boing Boing. Mm-hmm. And so I did visit the studio and see that open house. But when I finally quit Warner's and went to UPA, it was not the same old UPA that you're talking about. It was the new one when Henry J. Saperstein bought the studio. And he was producing not theatrical cartoons, but Mr. Magoo for TV, mm-hmm. and Dick Tracy and Joe Jitsu. And then we got into features such as Gay Paris and Mr. Magoo's Christmas Carol, mm-hmm. and the Famous Adventures of Mr. Magoo. So I went from Warner's to UPA without knowing anything about layout. So again, I had to ask my buddy who was there, how do you do layout?
Yeah.
I just got the job as a layout man. He showed me the few tricks. And after 2.5 weeks, when he supervised me, he said, "Bob, you're on your own. You can do it now." So I learned how to do layouts in 2.5 weeks. And then I found an animator who was very friendly. And I would go to him with my drawings and say, "What do you think? Is this what you need?" And he gave me advice. And that's how I learned again, just by doing it or getting the job and then doing it.
Do you remember what years that was when you started and then when you left UPA?
1960.
1960 is when you started?
That's when I started. I quit Warner's, having been there almost 3 years. Mm-hmm. I was a background painter working on Daffy Duck and Bugs Bunny and Foghorn Leghorn. Mm-hmm. But my friend said, "Bob, come over here, you can earn more money." And I think that's what drew me in. A new challenge and a little more money, and that got me to quit Warner's. It turned out the Warner's years were the best years of my career, I think. I just love working there.
Why do you think they were the best years of your career?
I was learning how to paint backgrounds their way. And Bob Gribrock, who was working for Bob McKempson as the painter, taught me his theory of color, mm-hmm. which really was an eye-opener. I'll give you one little hint. Okay. I was wondering why all of his backgrounds were so beautiful, how they fit, all the colors fit together. He told me a secret. Every single color he put in, he put a drop of orange in.
Really?
And that made everything work together very well because they all had a similar base. Mm-hmm. So even if it was blue, just a touch of orange, or maybe a drop in the blue color. And that color, along with all the other colors, were just wonderful together.
That's amazing. Now, I usually wait until the very end to ask you the fans questions. However, somebody specifically, and Devin's that person, you brought up Bob McKimson, and then he wanted to know, would love to know more of your time at Warner Brothers and working backgrounds in Bob McKimson's unit. Now, you just told us with the drop of orange, that's how everything tied in. That's how everything looked so beautiful, and everything looked like it meant to be there. There was nothing out of place. We talked about the paints, but you got any fun Mr. McKimson stories? I've never gotten the chance to ask that question, but I got to imagine working in his unit for backgrounds, you got to have some pretty cool stories.
Well, I was sorry I never met Bob McKimson, even though I was working there in his unit. And they put me together in a room with another guy who was designing layouts and doing characters. And I didn't realize that I was working with Bob Gibbons. For several years, he and I shared a room. He would smoke his pipe and I would do my drawings. And we would put on Frank Sinatra movie records all day. We'd play Frank Sinatra. And we didn't talk much because he was busy and I was busy. But I realized later, wow, this is some character I'm with. He's a very famous guy, beautiful character designer. I mean, he kicked off the Bugs Bunny character, who was later refined by Bob McKimson, I think, and several people, Chuck Jones and Frizz all used Bugs, but the final Bugs Bunny was designed by Bob McKimson, model sheets. There's one model sheet by Gene McCurdy, who did the earlier Bugs, probably the one that Bob Gibbons had designed. Yeah. And the studio was on just outside of the Warner Brothers lot. So we would jump the fence there in the back lot and go and have lunch in the commissary, the cowboys and the other people who worked there. That was fun. I enjoyed the big studio experience working there.
Thank you for sharing. I really appreciate that. So there you go, Devin. There's a little bit of peek behind the curtains. So you're going from UPA, or you're coming from, you said Warner Brothers, and then you went to UPA. And then when does Charlotte's Web come into play? You were the art director for that one, and that's one of my favorite movies.
I should have clarified that. That was done over at Hanna-Barbera.
Charlotte's Web?
Yeah, okay. But Vincent Magoo's Christmas Carol and Gay Prix were done at UPA, yes. Okay,
and then, so with that being said, when do you leave UPA? What year do you leave UPA again?
1960 to 65.
65 is when you leave.
Actually, 64.
64. And then after UPA, you're going over to Hanna-Barbera?
Well, yes, but there was a detour. After UPA closed its doors, and me and Art Babbitt were the only two people left, we were doing commercials. Then I went over to Chuck Jones, Tower 12, and I was hired. And it soon occurred to me that I was hired only as an assistant background layout. And so I didn't feel like I was happy there because of that. I wanted to be a full-fledged layout man. After all my experience. And so I left after 2.5 weeks. But Chuck Jones would have a meeting of all the staff occasionally, or we would go into a theater nearby and we'd see the latest finished cartoon that he had done. And, Chuck was just a wonderful speaker. Everyone loved him. It was fascinating to hear him talk. So I was always glad to have been there for that. But that's when I went to Hanna-Barbera. I quit that Tower 12 is what his name of his company was. So I went over to Hanna-Barbera. And when I got there, I found there was a busy beehive of people working on Johnny Quest.
Yes, that's another classic. I love that cartoon growing up.
That's right.
Now
they had brought in a lot of New York illustrators to handle the drawings because, we were just funny cartoonists do the funny stuff. We didn't know how to draw this other kind of realistic drawing like Johnny Quest required. So they put me into the background department. I painted backgrounds on the Quest for about 3 months. And then it was over, it was ended. Well, they only made 26 pictures of Johnny Quest, one season's worth. And they didn't follow it up because it was too expensive. They thought they would never recover the cost, but I don't think they realized how successful it would be. They would run for years. And so we were left with still going back to the funny stuff like Hillbilly Bears, and a few other funny stuff, Yogi Bear, and then we got orders to do another realistic show, Space Ghost and Dino Boy.
Yes, yeah.
They were both in the same show. They would show one Space Ghost and one Dino Boy. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden we had to do the illustrative stuff again. And this time we didn't have these New York artists. They were all either went back to New York or they went to other studios. We didn't keep them. So I had to remember my art school days of painting the human figure again. And I found some Tarzan comic books, and I took them home and I copied them so I could sort of get my mind around drawing full figures again. Mm-hmm. That helped me, I think.
So what was I know you said the mindset for bringing in the New York artists were because they were more dabbled and they were realistic. Did they stick around or come back when you guys started doing things like Scooby Doo, or was that strictly?
No, they were gone.
They were gone again.
They went to other studios or went back to New York where they did the comic books. Okay. So, every year, I was there 27 years, but every year there was a big layoff. And then we had to rehire the staff again when the production started. So but there were about 6 or 7 of us that were a nucleus that weren't laid off. And because they had to design new shows for the next season. So we were doing presentation of new shows, doing the artwork for it. They have archives in some building somewhere. All the drawings remain for these new shows that didn't sell. Mm-hmm. It's all stacked away somewhere. Man. I wish they would have an exhibit of that.
I really wish they would, because there's so many. I live out on the East Coast. I'm out in Florida, and we don't have very, I talked to Jerry Beck a couple days ago because he had posted, hey, we're going to do an animation exhibit for somewhere in North Carolina here in the next couple weeks. And I was like, any chance that it's going to be anywhere in Florida? Because I would love to go to an animation exhibit. He's like, well, hell, we just did one, a couple years ago. I think he said before COVID. I'm like, damn it, I wish I would have known ahead of time or seen this, because I've always wanted to go to these, because every time I get to talk to you guys tell me about just the folders and folders and folders of stuff that people have collected and stored over the years. And with Warner Brothers, they got an archive, and it's sitting in a warehouse collecting dust for none of the fans to really see, or none of the guys and gals that are still around that can appreciate that hard work that they did so many years ago that just got shelved because either no money, they didn't think it would sell, or what have you. So I would really love to see an animation exhibit just of the stuff that probably didn't get made. I think there's a market for it, and I think there's an exhibit of fans who would, especially like myself, would love to see.
They're owned by Warner Brothers now, so they're the people to approach if you want to do that.
All right. Well, I'm gonna have to sit here and make a little note. Maybe I can get in contact with one of them. We can do something in Florida. Fly old Bob Sanger out to Florida. You ever been to Florida, Bob?
Yes, I went to Disney World.
Yeah, that's the only thing we really got here.
Really, I was a little uncomfortable because everywhere I've lived in California was between mountains, or a mountain in the background. But in Florida, it's flat. There's
Yes.
nothing there. No, not even a hill.
No, I mean there's a hill at the end of my driveway, but I was in the Navy for about 7 years, so I was stationed in Washington State and then San Diego. I've never seen driving through LA, right? So when we planned the trip to go to pack all of our stuff up from Washington State when we got stationed in San Diego, I planned the trip where we were going through LA at like 2-3 o'clock in the morning because I figured there's no traffic. But when we were going through LA, it was during the Lakers were making a run for the postseason, so they were in the playoffs. I did not realize that it take 3.5 hours, almost 4 hours, to go 1.3 miles on that interstate.
Oh,
There was
wow.
Yes, I've never seen traffic like that in my life since or before then. However, the Mexican food in Southern California was amazing. The weather amazing. Like 1 week a year, it got into the triple digits. There was no mosquitoes, which was fantastic. Coming from Florida, that's all we've got: heat and skeeters and sharks. So I really enjoyed living out in Southern California for a while. But when you get out here, you're right. There's there's no scenic views. I mean, we got some trees and shit, but there's no mountains, there's no lakes, there's no snow. So
That's why the movie industry moved from New York to California way back in the 20s because of the weather. So many sunny days. And many of the studios had no tops. They shot out in the open. They had plenty of sun. It was great.
yeah, I can only imagine. So jumping a little forward here, man. Like I told you earlier, I've got him around here somewhere. I might have actually just put him back. I don't know where he's at, but it's neither here nor there. I was a huge fan of old Scooby Doo and the Gang. When do you guys get approached to start making this, or when do you start hearing about Scooby Doo? Where are you?
Scooby Doo, all of the characters were designed by Iwo Takamoto, and he wouldn't let anybody else draw them. He did all of the monosheets, which were extensive. Like Scooby itself must have had 6 or 7 pages of poses. But I did help on one part. They brought me a drawing of the Mystery Machine and said, Bob, we want you to decorate this. Put some color on stuff. Well, this is what's happening around town now. There's a lot of flower children.
Yeah.
And so I put some nice lines and I put some flowers on the front and on the sides. And the words, the Mystery Machine, were on the side of the truck. And I put them all together in a block so they could be colored with one color. Couldn't you imagine if they were separated, they have to paint each letter?
Yeah.
So I put it together so it's just one color on the whole thing. Anyway, that was my contribution to the series. Of course, I was running layouts on Scooby at the time, and I was in charge of getting some of these monster characters designed. So we used Alex Toth for that. He was a freelancer. And we had some people on staff who could do it, but not very many. I did a few. I did the Tar Man and the Minor 49er and the Electric Monster. And that was an interesting one. I went to a electric, I tried to get reference for what kind of devices I could turn into a character. So I went to a power company in North Hollywood, and I looked at all the different machines and stuff, and I had no ideas of what to do. So what I did finally do was just drawing a monster like this, and I asked the ink and paint people to use a different technique, using shooting on ones, but using a texture over the paint or around the paint. If you shoot on ones, it'll flicker like this. And that's what we did. We just used a very simple character with the overlay of sponge on the cell. Must have been difficult for the cell people to do that, to paint, but it worked.
Yeah. Now, I know some people do and then some people don't, but would you watch the shows when they were coming out on TV, or would you not watch the shows you worked on?
Oh, you always did,
Yeah.
because they would show them in the studio theater.
Mhm.
But I had to admit that we got so busy, we had to send a lot of the Scooby stuff overseas to be animated and laid out. When they came back, there were a lot of mistakes and bad animation, but the time was all gone. The deadlines were so close, we had to just put them on the screen. And I was embarrassed, I'm afraid, to see a lot of bad animation.
Yeah.
There was one with Cher and
Sonny Bono.
yeah, Sonny Bono and Cher were guest stars on the Scooby. And the animation was so bad, I just couldn't watch it. In fact, there's a website called Scooby Doo Mistakes. Have you ever heard of that?
No, but I'm gonna write it down and look it up right after we get off this.
Just type in Scooby Doo Mistakes and you'll come in with his website, and they just show all these badly animated scenes
Mhm.
and they make jokes out of them. Anyway, I don't mind. You know, that's what was. We just had to live with it.
Yeah, I mean,
And that's what happens when you get too much work and there's no time to correct things. What are you going to do?
How crazy was this show during the process of making the show? I mean, I got to imagine that, I don't want to say you guys weren't getting these numbers because you guys had Flintstones, you know, a little while before, and that was the biggest animated sitcom of all time up until I believe The Simpsons. You know, it's depends on what you look at as far as fan tuning and people watching and all that other stuff. But the Flintstones were the biggest thing since sliced bread. And then you guys get another hit with Scooby Doo, and I got to imagine the production time and for both of those shows was hectic. Do you remember anything? Because we got a few questions about production and then how long it would take from script to seeing it on TV. But do you remember anything about those production schedules when it was coming?
Well, I'll tell you, when I was before I went to Hanna-Barbera, I heard that they were a sweatshop.
Mm-hmm.
But be careful, you go there, you'll be under intense pressure. Yeah. But when I got there, begin to work, I just loved the pressure and the fast pace. And we had 3 units working 3 pictures at a time on Scooby. And maybe there were 2 animators. We had to split it up. There was to get it work done on time, put on 2 or 3 layout men on the same picture. And we were asking them to do at least 6 scenes a day of layout. That would be minimum. That I set myself the example of doing more than that. I think 13 scenes a day on Scooby, because I was laying out as well as supervising. Mm. And I enjoyed the intense pressure because I found ways to cope with it. And it's sort of exciting to work that fast and get it done and have it look good. So I didn't mind it at all.
Did you have any favorite episodes from that original run? Maybe some you worked on and then some you had your friends work on? You remember?
Well, I think the first one, the first Scooby, we were setting the style. Mm-hmm. And I drew a lot of the backgrounds on the first one because the storyboard was done by Howard Swift, mm-hmm. a freelancer. He was doing a lot of board work for us, but everything he put on the board was very minimal. It didn't give any hint as to style. So I thought about the fact that Scooby is not cartoony, or not realistic like Johnny Quest. It's sort of in the middle. Mm-hmm. I call it comedy adventure style. Yeah. So that's the way I approached the backgrounds on Scooby, and that became the style pretty much of the show.
Now with the backgrounds, so when I was doing a more in-depth read of what you've done throughout your entire career, I mean, we've talked backgrounds, we've talked painting, we've talked character design and character work. What do you feel spoke to you the most out of all of the facets that you can be as an animator? Was there one specific that you absolutely enjoyed doing more than the other?
I just loved drawing scenes with characters in the background, because I'll tell you a story. On Space Ghost, it was very slow. Alex Toth had just quit for some reason. I never found out why he and I had some sort of difference or whatever. And so when I got the assignment to do layouts and to head the layouts in Space Ghost, and I took Alex to lunch, and I begged him to, "We need you." I said, "We just can't do this without you." He said, "Okay." He went home, and every week we'd send him a script, and he would send us all the characters, not only the characters, the vehicles, and do even some backgrounds. He would do the whole show in a week and send it to us, and we put it into production. Of course, we couldn't use his exact drawings, because he was putting a lot of black on the characters, and in those days we weren't using black areas. That's another story. Well, a quick story is when Doug Wildey did Godzilla, and he came in, he used a lot of black in his characters in the backgrounds, and the studio finally relented and said, "Okay, do it." But in those days we couldn't use it. So we would have to redraw his characters so they would go through animation with no problems.
What were the problems? Just being the guy on the outside looking in, would it just be more difficult to animate with a bunch of black backgrounds and stuff like that, or?
No, well, the black was mostly on the characters.
Okay.
And so we had to reduce them to line drawings without the black.
Gotcha.
And I think probably Alex wasn't too happy with that, but I think he understood.
Yeah.
Then Bill Hanna called a meeting of the layout crew, and 3 or 4 of us went in, and Bill said, "What's wrong? We're behind deadline on this. Can anybody tell me how we can speed this up?" And I put my hand up like this. And so, "Bob, we have an idea." I said, "Yeah, there are too many backgrounds." There are 19, I said, there are 19 backgrounds in this, and you could do it in 9 backgrounds. And then the meeting closed, and Ewo came over to me and said, "Bob, we're going to put you in charge of the layouts." And so I devised, I took my, I made an invention of background charts. So when I got a storyboard, before I would do the layout, I would plot the whole picture, how many backgrounds I need, and what scenes go on what background. I called it a background chart. And other people picked it up and began to use that system, and it did save a lot of time. And we did get back on schedule. A couple of years later, somebody came to me from Canada for a job, and he said, "I have this background chart that I use. It's terrific." And I said, "Yeah, I invented it." Anyway.
Did he at least ask you to sign it?
We did get back on schedule, so it worked out. And also I instituted a new way to draw sky backgrounds. By that, before, every sky background, whether it was a tilt or a vertical or a pan this way, had to have a new background. I invented what you call a non-directional sky background, where the clouds were sort of circular. The cars are circular. You can do a vertical tilt or a tilt like this way or straight on, and it worked. So we cut down the number of sky backgrounds that way. That saved the background painting department problems too. And then I instituted a system of saving backgrounds and keep numbering them to make a stock animation system with not only backgrounds, but later on characters, cops, housewives, bad guys. So that if a layout man had to dream up, instead of drawing a new character, which was the layout's problem, was to do the incidental characters,
Mhm.
they could go to this library and find something and then change it slightly, new clothes, different hairstyle, and use another character again in another picture. So I put in a lot of systems that way.
You're changing the game. Did that Canadian artist, did he get you to sign your
Yeah,
did he even ask, did he ask you for your autographs?
we were doing 6 new shows a year, and then all of a sudden we had 14 shows.
Yeah.
We oversold. So it's a good thing we had those libraries, because we sure used them.
Yeah, it'll definitely help, shave some time off of those deadlines.
Yeah.
I know I told you we jumped around, and I don't want to keep you, too much longer, but did you have fun, at least the first part of this? We've been going for about 40 minutes now. I figured we could rotate into some fans' questions.
Sure.
And like I said, we can get you back on here for a part 2 if you're up for it. Because like I said, we've only scratched the surface, really. I mean, we jumped around a little bit here and there. There, like I said, there was just no way of us possibly getting your entire career boiled down into 60 minutes, right? So
we could do it again. That's okay.
Beautiful. I love to hear that, because like I said, I'm having a lot of fun with this, and some of these fans' questions were very good. And I wanted to make sure I asked this one first. But before we get to that, just one second, I got one more question before. We talked about Bill and Joe here a few times. The creators of Hanna-Barbera Studios. What was your initial meeting like them when you came to work with Hanna-Barbera? Did you get to meet with them before you signed on to work with that studios?
Yes, I met them occasionally when I had a problem.
Mhm.
When I was doing storyboards later, Joe would look at all the storyboards. He would call us in, and he would add bits of dialogue and change some actions.
Mhm.
But I always looked upon him as like a Cary Grant. He was very handsome, dark skinned, but also that he was a nice guy, a real gentleman. So different from Bill Hanna, who was more backslapper, and he talked loud and he was strong, just the opposite of Joe. But they made a great team. But they divided their work in half. Bill would do the production from animation to camera, but Joe would do the creation of new shows through layout. And so they kept themselves in their own areas. Anyway.
That's sad.
But Bill was very tough, and Joe was pleasant. So they were 2 different guys, but they worked together and did all these wonderful cartoons.
Yeah, I mean, they changed. I don't want to say they changed the game, because before then, I mean, animation wasn't really too far along when they started doing what they do. But they've influenced and will continue to influence animators forever. Their name and their stake in this game that they call animation. I mean, they were a part of those pillars. They were those pillars that propped up animation. I mean, without them, we don't have fans like myself. I mean, we're probably into something else at this point. Animation isn't really a thing. So without them, I mean, the world kind of looks bleak. It's not as fun. It's not as slapsticky. There's not, a mouse and a cat running around. There's not a dog, with a whole group of people chasing villains. So it's definitely, I've completely understated their work and their importance in this industry, but it's kind of hard to articulate how important those 2 individuals were, as well as yourself and the many thousands of other animators that helped prop up those studios. So like I said, as we rotate into the fans' questions, this hands down was my favorite question asked probably ever, and it's a hypothetical and it's a fun one. John wants to know, Mr. Singer, who wins in a street fight, Mel Blanc or Chuck Jones? This one made me laugh quite a bit.
Mel Blanc, of course.
Mel Blanc, of course. There you go, John.
I think Chuck would be above it all.
Yeah, Mel Blanc's okay to take it a little street level, huh?
He would say, let's talk it out.
Yeah.
But Mel Blanc would give him a fist.
Yeah, that's what I like to hear, man. Jesse wants to know, best advice you can give someone that is looking for freelance storyboard work. They want to make sure that they can get their work out there so they're not consistently having to submit their portfolio. So do you have any advice for a fellow storyboarder that's trying to get their work out there and prominent?
Well, do a good board and then just show it. That's all you need to show. If you can show you can do boards, that they'll hire you on the spot if they need you.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so do boards. Doesn't have to be a whole board, but just show that you can draw and you understand the mechanics and know something about storytelling.
Beautiful.
But they would probably bring you on as a junior assistant under another board man, and he would give you work and supervise your work, criticize it. And then after probably a number of weeks, when he thought you were okay, he would say, all right, this board is yours, go do it.
Beautiful.
And of course, he would look at it, but he would be sort of shepherd you through the system. But that's the way that new people in the industry are always brought in. They're put under an experienced person who teaches them how to do it. Even if you've been in school studying it, you still have to go through that process of coming in as an apprentice, then an assistant, and then a journeyman. And also your pay would rise as you show that you could do the work.
All right, so put the hours in and get out there and just really put your head down and do what you do.
Yeah, do it.
Nikki wants to know, what would you say was the highest point in terms of animation quality at Hanna-Barbera? Was there an era that was at the peak?
I would say it was probably during the period just before I came with the Flintstones. Mm-hmm. They had a peak there. They were doing some wonderful cartoons, and they had great animators that were with them when they were MGM doing Tom and Jerry's. The same crew, Bob Gentle and some of the other animators went with Joe and Bill when they had a new studio. So they already had good talent on the staff. That's what you need, good talent. But you also need really good men like Bill and Joe who could do production and Joe was such a talent. He always amazed me. He could draw beautifully as well as decide what's a good property and what isn't.
Who was a better artist in your opinion, Joe or Bill?
Well, Bill didn't draw.
No?
Bill did timing, mm-hmm. and he did the music. Not many people knew that he was a wonderful at composing music. The themes, the Flintstones theme song, for instance, was his device, and so that was his expertise, and he did a lot of timing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Man, I didn't realize that he did the music for that one. I mean, obviously his studio did it, but I didn't know he was the big proponent behind that. So thank you for sharing that. Man, my handwriting is horrible. Painted Dragoness wants to know, as someone who finds your model sheets very helpful, which Hanna-Barbera character do you have the most fun drawing? For me, it's always been Huckleberry Hound.
Well, I enjoyed drawing Scooby when I finally learned how to draw him. Mm-hmm. In the beginning, with all the model sheets, you sort of search the pages to find the pose you need until you learn how to draw him. He's very tough to draw. Scooby's not easy. He's sort of a half realistic dog, the way he moves too. I have a story there. Scooby was designed as a four-legged dog on his it was not meant to be a stand-up dog until one storyboard man did draw him on his hind legs. Mm-hmm. and it went through production and nobody noticed it. And finally, I found out about it. I went to Bill Nichols, who was head of animation. And I said, we don't have any monarchies for a stand-up dog. He's never meant to be that way. But it was too late. It was already in production. So I had to put out some new model sheets on a stand-up Scooby, so that everybody would draw it the same way. Anyway, when I draw now for people, I enjoy drawing a Pebbles or a Bam Bam or a Scooby or a Fred Flintstone. Yeah. On my desk, I have a Jetson. I'm just drawing this morning.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Thank you for sharing that. John wants to know, do you have any cool Herb Spence stories?
Well, the animators work separate from us. They were like on the second floor of the studio. We never had lunch with them. They always went out to lunch together. And they would go out to lunch together. So we never met with the animators. They had their own clique, and so did we. So I never learned about Herb, only that I knew he was a wonderful animator. That's about it.
Beautiful. Zachary here, he's got a question about Charlotte's Web. Did you ever get to meet Debbie Reynolds? And if so, what was she like?
No. The recording was done either over in Hollywood or it was done at night at the studios. But I remember only one. I've only seen two characters in the studio. Like Jonathan Winters came once, and I was head of layout at the time, and I noticed the layout department was empty. Nobody was there. So I went out to look for them, and they were all in the backyard, the parking lot, around Jonathan Winters, who was giving him all his funny routines, entertaining the troops. And the only other person I saw was Gene Kelly came, because he did some work with us. And he was in the lobby, and I just saw him as I walked by. Noticed that he was really not a tall man, he was medium size, and a little bit older at the time. But that's about it. We never really saw, at UPA, I was introduced to a wonderful movie star that I was so excited to see her that all I could do was grin at her. Judy Garland came to meet all of the staff at UPA because we were doing Gay Parade. She did the voices. And they came to my room and introduced me to her. All I could do was shake her hand and grin. And she chuckled and moved on. That was it.
I got to imagine that was unreal, just to be in the same room with that lady. I mean, I got to imagine it was pretty crazy.
Well, I just love her work and her daughter's work, Liza.
So we talked about this during the first season. I don't know if you said it was the first season of Scooby Doo, but we did talk about outsourcing. But Alex wants to know, how did you feel about the outsourcing of animation?
Well, I was against it because it came back pretty badly done.
Yeah.
But there was one thing was good about it. Bill would send Scooby Doo's to Australia because we had two guys down there who did beautiful work on Scooby and faster than we did. And in fact, they brought the two of them to the US to show us what they did. And that gave us an eye opener that we better do our work and do it well because these guys are doing it very well.
Do you remember their
in Australia? But the work that was done overseas, there was a big strike in the industry against runaway production. They thought they were sending work away and taking work away from us. I didn't see it that way. The fact that because we assumed we were doing 14 shows or 10 shows instead of 6, it's a good thing we had the overseas capability because we could never have made the deadlines without it. So it enabled the studio to grow bigger and make more money, I guess, but do more shows, but at the cost of some quality.
Gotcha. Do you remember the 2 names of the artists that you were talking about in Australia?
I can't remember, no.
Okay, that's okay. The only reason I ask, excuse me, the only reason I ask is because I had a, and I know you were at Hanna-Barbera around the same time, so you might have met him, but he worked with David Feast. David Feast created Cow and Chicken. Dean Taylor, you remember or know of a Dean Taylor?
No.
Okay, because so he's a future ep, but he'll be coming out not next week, but the following week. And he was working down in Australia as an artist, and I believe Bill came down there. I think that's what he said. Yeah, Bill Hanna came down there, and then ended up bringing him back over, and that's kind of how he got his foot in the door at Hanna-Barbera. So I didn't know if that might have been him or not, but I'll ask him when we talk in a couple weeks. But King McDaniel.
By the way, the Australia people, Bill Ham went down and he opened a studio down there.
Mhm.
A Hanna-Barbera studio in Australia. And I think the Taft people, who had bought Hanna-Barbera, didn't like the idea of Bill having a separate studio down there and subcontracting work to it from here. So they had to close it up.
Do you know how long it lasted or how long it was open for?
Probably 1 or 2 seasons.
Yeah. Was that normal for them to put that much money into a studio and then them close it that quickly? Obviously, you got to cut your losses when you got to.
Not normal.
Yeah.
Well, I think they thought Bill was making profits by sending his own work to his own studio.
Gotcha.
And that was a problem with them. It's too bad because it was a good studio, evidently.
Yeah, that story came up with Dean. That's how he met Bill when he came down there, because he was working at the studio, or he was a part of either trying to get a job at the studio or he was working at the studio, and him and Bill kind of hit it off, and they would talk whenever they would come into town, and he was kind of the guy that
Dean may come in. I think Dean maybe came up when I was leaving the studio, retiring or working at home in 92.
Mhm.
So if Dean came up after 92, then I wouldn't have met him.
King McDaniel wants to know, how did the process of layout and character design go about at Hanna-Barbera? How short was the schedule on average to get those done? Obviously, we said we had to, outsource quite a bit, but do you remember how long the schedule really took?
Well, we had to turn out a new Scooby every week.
Wow.
Which is a lot.
Yes.
And so that's why we had to divide it up and doing 3 pictures at a time in layout, so that we could make at least one of them complete each week. I had another thought, but it escaped me. Oh, when we began to get busy, before that, when we only had a few shows, each layout man had to design their own incidental characters that were in a picture, not just the main characters, but the cop, the housewife, the bad guy. Maybe the bad guy might have been designed by somebody, but the incidentals were designed by the layout man. And that got to be a problem when we got busy with a lot of shows. So I asked the studio to open up a character design department that had nothing but new characters. They did that. Jane Barbera said, yes, go ahead and do that. And that proved that we could handle a lot more shows because of that. We had, I think at one point I had 15 designers designing all the new characters and doing model sheets and doing paste up, and it worked. We could handle more work that way.
Yeah, divide and conquer is what they say. We got a couple questions here from Cameron, and Cameron's one of the most thoughtful people when he comes up with questions, because a lot of people ask, and this is not a disparaging remark to anybody that writes in, because I appreciate every fan's questions when they write in, because you guys are listening to these, and I appreciate it. You can listen to any other podcast, but you're choosing to listen to mine. So like I said, that's not a disparaging remark against anybody that writes in. But he puts a lot of thought behind these questions, and he's one of my favorite people whenever I see pop up. So he's got 2 or 3 here, and we'll go one by one. But his first one, are there any goals you still want to accomplish?
No. I know I am doing something new now.
Yeah, what are you doing new?
It's, I've done a lot of commission work.
Mhm.
And a lot of Scooby and Flintstone and Jetson. And I have an agent I've had since '98.
Mhm.
And she has a partner, and they decided to make limited editions of a lot of my work.
Okay.
This only happened this year. So already we have like 25 designs being produced, printed. I think we're making 10 copies of each to see if they'll sell. If
Okay.
they sell, then we'll go into a lot more than that, maybe 100 of the ones that are popular. So that is new. So I'll be signing them as they sell. And I'm at a MouseCon in Bakersfield on the 30th of January, and we'll be showing those new drawings, new limiteds to the public, and see how they sell.
Now, is it? Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's it. Then we'll see if people are requesting drawings of mine, like a head of a character or whatever. They can order it, and I'll go home and do them, and we'll send it to them probably.
Beautiful. Is there a website that the fans can go, or do they contact your agents through anything in particular?
I can give you my agent's phone number. Okay. And her email number if anybody wants to contact her. I have given her about 45 or 50 pencil drawings.
Okay.
Whenever I do a limited or a commission, usually I will keep the pencil. Mm-hmm. And people evidently want the pencils as well as the color. Mm-hmm. So I can tell you her name is Michelle Smart. Okay. Michelle with 2 L's. And you can get her by emailing michelle@michellesmart.com.
Okay, and I'll put that in the link.
Her phone number would be 323-377-0591 is her phone number.
Okay. All right, and we'll also put those links in the description for the video, so people can go and then email her or give her a call if they want to buy something that old Bob has written on. So thank you for that, because I know there's, like I said, there's a lot of fans that really enjoy it. Like I said, I was not expecting that many people. So whenever I post anything that any of my guests coming on asking for fans questions, right? Depending on who it is, I'm expecting a lot or a little bit. It really depends on who it is. With you in particular, like, your career was so vast that your career has touched so many people's lives. So I was expecting quite a bit of response from this, but to just put it into perspective a little bit, I was not expecting I literally had to take my phone, right, and throw it across the room because it kept lighting up. It kept lighting up. It kept lighting up. As soon as I posted the picture and said I was talking to you, I had to get rid of my phone. It just would not shut up. There was so many people out there that just wanted to pick your brain, or wanted to see you, or wanted to hear your thoughts, and just listen to your career. And it blew me away. Like, I was expecting a lot, but I was not expecting that much, like to the point where for a few hours I had to go on the other side of the house because I was tired of hearing my phone ding, ding, ding. Even when I had it turned off, like the vibration was zzz, zzz, zzz. So it annoyed, and it sounds like I'm being an asshole here, but it was annoying, right? Because I was like, oh my God, what is going on? Like, I thought somebody, got sick, or something had happened. So I look at it, and it's just everybody wants a piece of Bob. They want to buy your artwork. They want to see what you're doing. They want to give you some well wishes. They want to tell you thank you, how much you meant to them growing up. So I love to get to do this part of the interviews and the talks, because you said it before, like, you guys were just doing your job, right? You were clocking in, clocking out. Everybody has a job. So when you look at it, I don't want to say you couldn't appreciate what you did, but you guys were so busy during that era, that peak. You guys were pumping out shows left and right, and pumping out episodes left and right. So you didn't get to really appreciate it as much as you can now. You look back and reflect on what you did and how many lives of these fans that you've changed. So I loved seeing this much fan interaction specifically for you, man. It really made my day to know that you touched so many people's lives. So
I'm gratified to hear that. I have a feeling that when I went on Facebook a year or 2 years ago and putting on my work on Facebook, I think I have a feeling that's when people begin to see it, and that probably would led to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
The fact that it was easy to find it, because I've got over 100 drawings on Facebook.
Yeah, it's one of my whenever. And I know we talked about him a little bit before, and you guys didn't really have their paths cross, but Robert Alvarez does the same thing. Like, he'll post cells that he's gotten, whether it was a gift from somebody, or him and his friend Tim. One of my favorite stories, him and his friend Tim would go to the Hanna-Barbera studios when they were little kids, and then they would go into the dumpsters and stuff and get cells or get drawings, because most of the stuff was just thrown away, from UPA to Hanna-Barbera, because nobody had the foresight to really keep this type of stuff, with the exception of Disney. Nobody really thought that this stuff kind of mattered to fans and stuff. And he had this story, and I think it was Bill. He came out with either a tire iron or a golf club and chased him and Tim off of the dumpsters. And then the next time they came out, they had a bar over it with a lock, because him and Tim were just getting into the dumpsters, getting any cells, any kind of drawings that they could possibly get. So I really enjoy seeing you guys share your artwork and the stuff that you did in your career. It really brings a smile on my face. So we already asked Devin's question. Now, we did talk about, not too much interaction with the voice actors, but you might have, with as hot and heavy as you guys were on Scooby Doo, you might have had some interactions. But Bri wants to know, do you have any cool stories of Don Messick's or Dawes Butler?
You'll have to repeat that,
Okay.
Julian, because you froze up.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Beautiful. Bri wants to know, do you have any cool stories of Don Messick's or Dawes Butler?
No, I never met them. And no, I just don't have anything on those two.
Okay. Drew wants to know, did you ever have any issues with network censoring during the productions of some of the cartoons you worked on? Do you guys have any kickback from the network censors that you can remember?
I think the networks were upset in the beginning with shows that were too violent. Johnny Quest was pretty violent. That's what brought Scooby Doo forward. Fred Silverman of CBS decided we can't do this anymore. People are writing us, and they don't like all the violent stories. So he knew that there were some TV shows with live action with kids solving mysteries. So he thought, hey, why don't we do a cartoon with that? just four kids solving mysteries, driving around, just like this live action show. And it was Silverman's idea to put a dog in.
Really?
The Scooby was not supposed to be the main dog. But that's that all of a sudden it was recognized that he was the lead character. But the reason this was formed was because of that problem that Fred was having with people complaining about violence. And even Johnny Quest, when it was created, there was no dog in there.
Mhm.
And I think JabberJaw said, let's put a little dog in there for humor, because it's a very serious show. There wasn't much humor in Johnny Quest. And they felt they should lighten it up. So Dick Bickenback was the one who designed Bandit for Johnny Quest.
Yeah, he was a great addition, man. I really enjoyed Johnny Quest.
So that balanced out the show, and it really made it work.
Beautiful.
As a relief from all the strong stuff.
Mhm.
But Scooby led to a lot of other shows with the same kind of format.
Mhm.
Clue Club and just a bunch of others did that. Okay, another question.
Yes, sir. 47 cartoon guy, excuse me. He didn't have a question. He just wants to tell you were one of my favorite Hanna-Barbera artists next to Ed Benedict, Jerry Eisenberg's, and Takamoto. So he just wanted to give his thanks because he really enjoyed your work. Larry.
Ed Benedict, excuse me.
Oh, go ahead.
Ed Benedict, I met him in, I think it was in Carmel or on the West Coast. I went to see him. And he was the one who designed the Flintstones in the beginning, the background styling and the characters. Of course, they went through a lot of changes until they finally finished up. Iwo Takamoto, I think, did the final drawings of Flintstones. But Jerry Eisenberg and Iwo Takamoto were among the top artists, along with Homer Jonas, Mo Golub, who did wonderful realistic drawing and animals. So we had a really talented crew there.
Yes.
You guys Bickenback had an assistant, Jack. Huber helped him do the layouts on Flintstones. So, and we had the best animators. When you get the best people, you have good product.
Yeah, 100%. I can't agree with you more. You guys had the best animators, in my opinion, of all time. And I'm pretty sure there's a lot of fans that will echo that same sentiment. Larry, my buddy Larry, one of my oldest friends here, and he does all the editing for our podcast. So we can't do 90% of what I do. I couldn't do it without Larry. So Larry, I appreciate you. But he wants to know, was there a scene during your career that you struggled animating the most? And if so, why?
Well, I've been drawing Scooby. It was very difficult for me until I drew him a lot. But I had to use all the poses that Ewo made until I finally learned how to draw him. That was the most difficult, yeah.
Yeah.
Scooby.
Couple more here. Here's another one that wasn't a question, but Gene Ham wants to know. He was a student of yours, or he doesn't want to know. He wants to tell you. Excuse me. Took classes from you in Hanna-Barbera. You were a great teacher. I first learned the rules of silhouettes from you. So Gene Ham was given his thanks. Thomas wants to know, why didn't Hanna-Barbera Productions do more feature films that would rival other studios?
Well, Joe always wanted to do feature films, but it turned out to be probably too expensive. That may have been the reason, money.
Money.
Yeah.
That's generally what it all comes down to. And we've got
because they took a lot. it just took a long time to make a feature, and that took animators, layout people away from the shorts people. So probably was not a good idea to do more than one or two of them. Okay.
And then this is the last one. It's not so much a question, but it is a thanks. Do you remember an Ed Baker?
I don't think so, no.
Okay. So he's got he sent me this on Twitter, and I just wanted to read it to you because, like I said, this this podcast is about giving people their roses. You know, there's so many people that are not here that I can't tell thank you. I can't tell I appreciate everything you guys did for me as a kid. So whenever I get the chance to have one of you guys and gals on that I've had on, I want to make sure that you guys know before you leave here how much you guys touched our lives, right? So whenever I can get somebody in that's had, you know, firsthand experience with my guests or knows my guests or just is a fan of my guests and they can tell their story, I like to tell them that. So Ed Baker, he wanted me to tell you, in fall of 1990, I moved to LA from Iowa and was soon introduced to Bob. Mr. Singer had no idea who I was, but gave me a tour of the old Hanna-Barbera building. He was boarding the movie episodes and invited me to the office every week or so to go over my drawings and help me get up to speed to hopefully break into animation. I met with him regularly into early spring of 91 when he arranged for myself to interview with the directors on Tiny Toon Adventures. I owe my now 30-year career in animation and 2 Emmys for storyboards to Mr. Singer. And I want to thank him again for teaching me so many things and for being endlessly gracious with his time back then in that haul-away trailer behind Hanna-Barbera. Sincerely, Ed Baker. Yeah, so he wanted me to tell you that story and how much he appreciates. If it wasn't for you, he doesn't think he'd be in animation. So.
Well, I appreciate that. Probably I knew him as Ed.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I've forgotten his last name, but
Yeah.
That's very gratifying to hear. I'm happy I was able to be of help. I enjoy a lot teaching because I've done a lot of different things: boarding, layout, character design, background painting. I've done all of that. And I get a lot of pleasure out of teaching it to somebody else. So my work with Ed was very gratifying because he seemed to be a very good student.
Well, I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate all the fans that have written in. Obviously, we can't get to all the fans' questions because there was a bunch, and I don't want to keep Bob for too much long. I'm pretty sure you got some more important things. You're probably going to go dance and go have a nice dinner. You're going to go do something fun when you get off here with me, man. So like I said, I appreciate you taking the time for me today, and I can't wait to do this again. I can't wait for part 2. And well, like I said, we could do damn near 52, 62 parts just on your life and what you've done and where you're going and where you've been. So like I said, I appreciate your time spending here with me, Mr. Singer. And like I told you when we started, man, legend just not, it doesn't seem like it's a big enough word for you, your career, and what you've done in this industry. So I appreciate all the hard work and all the many hours.
All I can say is thank you for asking me, and I enjoyed this very much, and I'll do it again with you.
Beautiful. Is there anything you'd like to tell the fans? This is your time to really say anything you want to say before we wrap up. Is there anything that, obviously we're talking about the prints that you're doing, and if they sell really well and at the end of the month at what was the convention again? It was the MouseCon?
MouseCon. I'll show you some of the limiteds if you have time.
Oh, I've got all the time in the world for you.
Here's one of them.
That is beautiful.
And here's another one.
That is phenomenal.
And so I've got a bunch more, but we can look at them another time.
Beautiful. I'm gonna as soon as we wrap, I want to tell you a Scooby Doo story real quick. It won't take longer than 30 seconds, but I think you'll get a kick out of it. But no better way to wrap this up than he's been Bob. I've been Julian. This has been the What's in My Head podcast, and this has been another piece, and it was a huge piece of your childhood. Good night.